Yeah. So my father's sitting next to Chocolate, and my father looks at Chocolate, and he says, "I cannot believe that you would come to church dressed this way." And Chocolate smiled at my dad and said, "God doesn't care how we're dressed, only that we are here." And that was the best thing that anybody could have told him at that point, because he's like, wow. It blew him away, totally blew him away that was the response that he got from Chocolate. And I've always thanked Chocolate for that response. Everyone in this church made my dad feel welcomed, and I appreciated that. Every one of you came up and said hi to him and welcomed him lovingly. And it just really showed him that there's a lot of good love and Christian fellowship within this building. And my dad needed to see that at his age. Dad heard Pastor Gary preach of God's love and forgiveness and how all sinners are welcome in this church and in heaven. And I think it was the first time that my father had heard a positive message from the Bible and about God. He'd never heard somebody say something positive. It's just, "You're a sinner, you're going to hell." That was all he'd ever heard. He'd never heard somebody talk about Jesus' love and forgiveness. And when he sat around this congregation and looked at the members of this congregation, this is not a congregation that my father would have ever in a million years come to sit down with. But I was here, and I brought him here, and he needed to know some things, and he needed to learn about me. So, and then another thing that, that my dad noticed is that we did not pass an offering plate, and nobody begged for money. And that was the one story he told everybody when he got back to Kentucky. They never passed an offering plate. So, which was good. That afternoon, about 20 people came to my house for a wonderful cookout. And my dad heard the people in this church talking about me and how much they cared about me and how much they loved me and how much they respected me. Something he never heard my brothers and sisters or my biological family say about me. I remember one time during the picnic, my wife was there, and she goes, "I cannot believe what I'm seeing." I said, "What are you seeing?" And she pointed out the window, and I looked, and my dad was sitting at a table with Ray Taylor talking. And my wife says, "I would have never, ever thought that I would ever see your father here, much less sitting with the people that you go to church with, having wonderful, wonderful fellowship." And, I want to thank Ray for that, because I think that hearing other people talk about Dwayne and how much they thought about Dwayne made my father think, well, maybe I've missed something. Maybe I've missed something here totally. The next day, I took my father back to Tennessee, where he's from. And it was a much slower ride back home, and quite a bit quieter. And we talked a lot. And I'd never talked to my father before. And we talked about things that happened in our lives and things that we missed in each other's lives. And when I dropped him off, we had totally forgiven each other. And we had started over. And my dad, the lesson that you guys in this church taught him was that even he could be forgiven. All he had to do was ask. And we, as a congregation, showed this man how to do this. So my father returned to his home and decided that he needed to change some things up. He made efforts to make up things with my brothers and sisters. After the visit here, my father and I talked once a week on the phone. And we would talk, and literally did talk. It wasn't superficial. It was, "How are you? How's this? How's that?" But the thing was that before we hung up, we always said, "I love you," to each other. I was 42 years old the first time my father told me that he loved me. And all my life, I never thought that that was a possibility because of the way he behaved and the way he acted. Well, I'm glad to stand here in front of you as my father's gay son to let you know that it took the gay son to show my father how to get to heaven and how to attain Jesus' love and forgiveness. My father joined the church when he was 82. He was baptized when he was 83. And I had 3 wonderful, wonderful years with my father. I would not have had those years with my father had not I witnessed what Dwayne went through with his father. And sometimes we have to be the ones brave enough to take the first step. And so, and we might get rejected, but at least we'll take the first step. My father passed away on October 24th, 2005. I will apologize in advance to any of you diamond heads in the crowd. But I was dating someone that was inappropriately too young. And he decided that he wanted to do something with me that old people do. So he bought tickets to the Neil Diamond concert for us. I don't like Neil Diamond. So I'm sitting in this crowd of Diamond heads. And I mean, this is like the sea of gray hair and blue hair. And I'm like, why am I here? So I'm praying the whole time this concert starts. Oh, God, get me out of here. Let's end this. Please, let's end this. So about the fourth song, the phone rings. And Cody looks at it and puts it back in his pocket. It rings again. He looks at it, puts it back in his pocket. The third time he rang, he elbowed me and said, we need to go. I said, why? He goes, let's just go outside. So we go outside, and Cody told me my father passed away. And I looked up at God and I said, you know, I was only kidding. I would have stayed. But I went to my father's funeral with my partner at the time. And I wasn't sure if my brothers and sisters were more offended that I came out of the closet at Dad's funeral, or that my partner that I brought up there with me was a young black man. Either way, I gave them a lot to talk about and think about. And to this day, I really don't have a relationship with my brothers and sisters. I have 8 of them. I like to say the only thing we have in common is we share a uterus. But that would be about it. In closing, I wanted to tell one of my dad loved a good joke, and I think I take that after him. And I was reviewing some of the jokes, and I realized I can't tell most of those. But here's one that I can tell. There used to be this guy at the Baptist church named Bill. And Bill missed church like 5 Sundays in a row, and the preacher realized that Bill wasn't there. So the preacher goes to Bill's house and asks Bill, we've noticed you haven't been to church, where you been? And Bill said, well, you know, Pastor, I don't have clothes. I don't have good clothes to wear to church, and I'm embarrassed to go to church wearing my old clothes. So the pastor goes back to his congregation, and they take up a phone, and they buy Bill some clothes. The next Sunday, the pastor notices that Bill's not there. And the pastor got a little peeved about that, so he goes to Bill's house that Sunday afternoon, and there's Bill on his porch wearing his new clothes. And the pastor said, Bill, where were you? He goes, you know what, Pastor? I got up this morning and I put on these new clothes and I felt so good looking and so prosperous, I decided to go to the Episcopal Church. This is my son here. Ian will be 29 years old on June 28th. He does look like me. This is an old picture of him. This is when he was in high school, and we had the help of the St. Augustine Diocese to help control his looks. Because today he has hair down to his about here, and he's a tattoo artist, so he's kind of covered in ink. But this is what he looked like back in those days. And this is Dwayne, for those of you who remember Dwayne. And in closing, I just want to tell you, I would have never had a good relationship with my father had I not tried. And if I had waited around for my father to come to me, it would have never happened. And I just, when my father died, I got home from the concert that night. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to feel. And I turned the TV on, and I see that Rosa Parks had died the same day my father died. So I called Pastor Gary, and I'm laughing. And Gary says, it's a little strange, I'm a little concerned. Your father has passed away and you're laughing. I said, yes, Pastor Gary, because Rosa Parks had died also, and I'm pretty sure my father's standing in line waiting behind her. But anyway, strange, things happen strangely. But my father, even though he wasn't there and the bad things that my father did, he was still my dad. And we love our dads because he's our dad. And I like to think that my dad did a lot to influence me, and that there's a lot of me in him, and some of the bad, but some of the good as well. And when my son was born, I remember they handed him to me, and I'm sitting there scared to death. Because I had no idea what a father is. What does a father do? What am I supposed to do with this person that's here? So I decided that what I would do was whenever I needed to do something, I would stop and say, now what would my father do Then I did the opposite. And it worked out quite well. My son, I told him every day of his life, I love you, I love you, I love you. And he tells me I love you back every time we talk. And it's a great relationship that I have with my son. And I want to thank you guys for letting me come up here and talk with my dad. Thanks.
Amen.